It was intended to ensure Hong Kong's continuity and status as an open and liberal capitalist society. But months of protests have revealed concerns over a gradual erosion in the principle of one country, two systems, which promised Hong Kong its high degree of political autonomy for 50 years under the Basic Law. From a widespread protest against an extradition bill to a greater call for freedom and democracy. 23 years on, the system has now put Hong Kong and China on a collision course. Hong Kong is now a city in turmoil, broken and divided, between those who place a lot of value on two systems and those who see the importance of one country.
Today in Hong Kong, the people want less of China. What they don't actually understand is, by distancing ourselves from China, will further actually erode the one country, two system.
Competing visions for the territory's future have forced people out of their homes to challenge the authority and the central government.
They cannot give me how a better Hong Kong they are dreaming of, or how they can make a better Hong Kong. This is sad.
Is there a way out of the political quagmire? Can the differences between these two competing visions be bridged?
Give me liberty or give me death.
October 1st, 2019. That was the day when China erupted into a sea of jubilation as it celebrated 70 years of communist rule. The event also marked the country's spectacular rise as a world economic and military power, a nation that's proud and confident of its future. However, 2,000 kilometers away from Beijing, it's an entirely different story altogether. For months now, protesters in Hong Kong have wreaked havoc, leaving behind a trail of destruction in the heart of the city. They're demanding freedom and democracy in the special administrative region. The air in the city is thick with anger, and the swell of emotions are palpable, especially among some segments of the population.
Electoral reform.
That's also the sentiment of a Hong Konger who'd like to be known only by his nickname, Yip. Yip has been involved in anti-government demonstrations since they first erupted 4 months ago. The highly educated youth agreed to speak to us on condition of anonymity, citing fears of police arrest. He's decided to take to the streets and challenge the authorities because he's lost faith in the government. He says the fight by the people in Hong Kong right now is no longer about the battle against the now defunct extradition bill, which had ignited mass protests against the government and its chief executive, Carrie Lam. Instead, it's about a struggle to preserve their freedom and way of life, which he believes is under threat from Beijing.
The government has tried doing a lot of stuff to deprive our civil rights, our human rights. And one of the most distinct character of Hong Kongers, or even the Hong Kong society, is to be different from mainland China. That's like the spirit of Hong Kong. It's a part of China, but it's also not a part of China in a lot of senses. But if the government doesn't see it this way, they want us to be more China, I don't think this is appropriate.
The reality is, months of protests have left the city divided between two opposing sides. Between those who are fighting for greater democratic rights and separate identity, and those who want to bring Hong Kong closely integrated with the mainland. But there are also those who just want to protect their own economic livelihood. Some, like 45-year-old Ms. Chua, feel that the protesters have gone a little too far in pressing for their demands for democracy, especially after the protests turned violent. The tour guide, who's the sole breadwinner in the family, has just lost her job as a result of the continuing protests, which have disrupted business and tourism. She's hoping that the political turmoil in the city could end soon.
最初呢嗰啲抗議呢，我哋係支持，因為和平示威啊嘛。如果係有政府做得唔好嘅話，我哋作為市民嚟講，應該係講出我哋嘅心聲。但跟住呢，到咗6月9號、6月11號以後呢，開始變咗有暴力傾向，所以呢我就唔係好支持贊成啦，因為我哋呢個城市係好和平啊。 咁啊，所有嘅一切繁榮啦，都係由和平之中產生啊嘛。咁啊，如果要暴力嘅話，就變到大家都唔安心啦。咁啊，做嘢都冇得做啦。而家好多人有啲失業啦，有啲呢，而家連出街都唔夠膽，咁失咗個安全感咯。
More than 20 years have passed since the sovereignty of Hong Kong changed hands from Britain to China on midnight, July 1st, 1997. But so far, the principle of one country, two systems has done little to change the identity of the people who regard themselves more as Hong Kongers rather than Chinese. Yip, for example, feels a sense of besiegement from the central government in Beijing.
I don't think it's working in a sense that you might see that the Beijing officials, including those in the liaison office, they are interfering with Hong Kong politics and even daily affairs more and more frequently. There is, I believe it's the 22nd article in the Basic Law stating that officials out of Hong Kong shouldn't intervene with any Hong Kong politics.
Martin Lee is a practicing lawyer. He's among those who played a leading role in drafting the Basic Law of Hong Kong, which forms the foundation of the principle of one country, two systems. He says that the intention behind the introduction of two separate systems for Hong Kong and China is good. He says that China's former paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, devised the concept of one country, two systems in the hope that Hong Kong would lead China towards a capitalist path.
Hong Kong was like the engine leading the China train, and he wanted China, therefore, to improve. In the meantime, he wanted Hong Kong to show them the way forward. And he wanted to catch up with us in 50 years' time. That's why 50 years, no change. Stay there. 50 years.
At that time, if China imposed direct rule over Hong Kong people would be so scared that there would be a loss of confidence in Hong Kong, and there would be a capital flight or talent flight. That means if China imposed direct rule over Hong Kong will lose its economic value to China and may even become a source of trouble for China.
Any direct rule would create an impression that China is not tolerant of the existing lifestyle, social and economic system in Hong Kong. So the one country, two system principle is to encourage the people of Hong Kong to govern Hong Kong themselves.
And for the last 22 years, Hong Kong has prospered. It boasts a GDP of $454.9 billion in 2019, more than double what it was in 1996. It enjoys a growth rate of 3.8% and continues to take top spots in economic competitiveness reports. As a key financial hub, Hong Kong has also served as a good base for China to reach out to the world due to its open and well-established legal system.
In fact, the two systems serve China very well. You can call that as a testing ground for China. So China can reach out to the world through Hong Kong. They would prefer to use Hong Kong as a base to either enter into China or for Chinese company to exit to the world. Hong Kong as a market is too small by ourselves. So if you have the backing of the entire 1.3 billion people, how wrong can that be?
The ease of doing business in Hong Kong, its connections with the rest of the world, and a large hinterland was what spurred Simon Shi to go into business. He created the Small and Medium Enterprises Association some 24 years ago and has been helping overseas businesses tap into the mainland market.
我哋而家做緊呢啲公司係幫助香港嘅公司嘅貨進入中國大陸市場。咁譬如我哋代理緊印尼嘅燕窩啊、南韓嘅面膜啊、呢個馬來西亞嘅榴蓮啊、台灣嘅食品啊，同埋巴西嘅凍雞翼啊、鳳爪啊，就進入中國大陸市場嘅。其實中國大陸市場好大嘅。咁其實香港係有條件做呢樣嘢嘅。
Hong Kong is irreplaceable in the Chinese system because of the link of a currency to the US dollar, freely convertible currency, and to the rest of the world. Hong Kong is always different. We are the international financial center.
But in spite of the benefits that have been generated under the principle of one country, two systems, it has also led to deep rifts within society. And this rift has been growing over the years.
Basically, the one country, two system works well economically. But in terms of the political aspects, one country, two system has tremendous tensions. Politically, many Hong Kong people, they are pluralistic. They love their existing lifestyle and freedom as well as civil liberties. But in mainland China, politically it is paternalistic, if not necessarily authoritarian.
But why have the sense of anger and frustrations become so deep-rooted in society? Why has the trust in the principle of one country, two systems eroded so quickly? And can this trust be restored? It was a single gunshot to the chest, fired at close range. The bullet pierced the left lung of an 18-year-old protester. It then stopped, just 3 centimeters away from his heart. He survived the shooting. But for the protesters, the incident was one shot too many. The shooting marked the escalation of the protests and a political turmoil that has shown no clear signs of abating. The police have drawn flak for allegedly using unnecessary and excessive force against the protesters.
You have every right not to aim at the protesters. If you have to shoot to the sky. If you have to shoot, in necessary case, shoot on the arms or legs, but not their heart.
But to the government, the police have issued a proportional response against a rowdy crowd and exercised tremendous self-restraint in dealing with the protests.
The police forces have been put in a very difficult situation. They have to carry their job in restoring law and order, and a lot of time they've been provoked. And I can't say every single decision made by individual police officer on par. I don't know, maybe there's 1 or 2 incidents, maybe. But I think by and large, our police force in Hong Kong are very professional. And I still think they are trying their best to restrain themselves. Consider the unrest been for 4 months. And I think if this happened in US, UK, or France, I mean, far bigger casualty would have happened. I still believe that if somehow we can find a way to calm everything down, I don't believe that that trust cannot be rebuilt.
But trust and patience appear to be running thin among the people after a series of events which have eroded confidence among certain segments of the public in the principle and implementation of one country, two systems. In 2003, about 500,000 people gathered in the center of Hong Kong to voice their anger against a controversial national security law. The bill carried a maximum life sentence in prison for treason, sedition, theft of state secrets, and subversion. The government maintained that the proposed law was necessary to protect the territory's security. But the public opposed it, arguing that the bill, if passed, would curtail free speech. The bill was shelved indefinitely. In 2012, attempts to amend the curriculum of the Hong Kong school system to include lessons on Chinese history and national identity was also met with pushback. A 10-day siege of the government headquarters ended after the then chief executive, Leung Chun-ying, announced that the lessons were no longer mandatory. In 2014, protesters again occupied the streets. Many expressed anger at Beijing's ruling that the island's chief executive must be chosen from a list of candidates approved by Beijing, instead of complying to the concept of universal suffrage. However, the campaign, which came to be known as the Umbrella Movement, ended without any concessions from Beijing. And now this. What started out as an opposition to a proposed extradition bill, which would allow criminal suspects to face trial in mainland China, has now morphed into a battle for greater democracy and freedom. And the tension is real. While China wants closer integration with Hong Kong and for the people to understand that it's part of China, the protesters want China to respect their rights and freedom as spelt out in the one country, two systems principle.
The mistake we probably have made is we did not actually deal with the so-called integration as if like we never planned for it. And so we enjoy the economic prosperity of those integration, but yet we didn't deal with some of the political fallout that comes with it.
This kind of tension can be seen in the past 22 years. And the recent extradition bill proposed by the Hong Kong government sparked a huge debate and public fear. And this kind of movement in opposition to the bill illustrates a fear of mainlandization of Hong Kong, a fear that Hong Kong is going to be more and more like mainland China, politically, socially, legally, and even culturally.
But apparently, the problem goes far deeper than that. Many Hong Kongers are increasingly worried about their future. They feel that their dreams have been left unfulfilled ever since the territory's handover from Britain in July 1997. Jobs are harder to get. Salaries have remained stagnant, while the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. For many of the youth in Hong Kong, they also feel that owning a home has become an impossible dream due to skyrocketing property prices. In fact, Hong Kong has one of the highest housing prices in the world. A tiny 284 square foot flat in City 1, a residential estate in Sha Tin, popular with first-time buyers, would cost an average of 15,000 Hong Kong dollars per square foot. The median monthly wage of a worker in Hong Kong is about 16,000 Hong Kong dollars. In other words, it would take a worker about 22 years to pay for a tiny apartment. And that is only if not a single cent goes to food, clothing, or anything else. Choi Tze-chu rents an apartment here in Sha Tin. He lives together with his aging parents and his older brother. The 29-year-old works at a food stall in a nearby wet market. With his meager salary a month, he's struggling to pay for the rent or move to a bigger flat, let alone having a house of his own. To him, owning a house is just a dream which can never be met during his lifetime. And that has contributed to a growing sense of despair and anger.
喺香港買樓個困難嘅程度係，你諗起買樓你就唔想再買樓啦。係因為如果你要去供一層樓嘅話咧，係你可能一世都供唔完，要你嘅子孫去幫埋你供。我諗政府喺對於房屋嘅政策上面係頗弱嘅，因為始終香港係一個商業主導嘅社會啦。咁政府能夠參與喺市場嘅空間唔大嘅，咁都唔能夠太過幫助到市民喺房屋置業上面嘅問題。
The people of Hong Kong basically have been quite tolerant of socio-economic inequality in the past 22 years. The structural situation of Hong Kong is to favor the capitalists and land developers in the past 22 years. Hong Kong has a relatively low tax system, and yet the capitalists and the land developers do not have to pay heavy tax to the government, let alone the introduction of progressive tax along the line of welfare state in the West. So as a result, in the past 22 years, many young Hong Kong people felt frustrated in terms of social mobility, in terms of the career prospects, in terms of the economic prospects.
Hong Kong, obviously, because we adopt a free market principle, so it's kind of in a way, it's like, it's survival of the fittest, and winner takes all type of thing. And the government never intervened the market, right? But perhaps with the crisis we are in today, maybe I think the people are now, may have to rethink about that kind of model. It's like, hey, maybe we don't want to have a model such that only the big company will get even bigger. Now, I don't know how it's going to do it because it's tricky, because we have never adopted this model before. But I think people are now basically saying, hey, we should not just let the economic benefit stays at just a handful of companies. How can we make it more fair?
One of the issues underlying the housing problem is the influence of Hong Kong's powerful property developers. Major property developers have even scooped up millions of square feet of agricultural land, but they remain undeveloped. Compounding the problem is the massive influx of buyers from the mainland. Cash-rich Chinese have been snapping up properties in Hong Kong, pushing the prices beyond the reach of the common folk. Ms. Carrie Lam now has plans to seize up to 160 hectares of land in the new territories over 3 years to build some 10,000 housing units.
I think we have to think out of the box, and we have to address these social injustice issues. Not saying that even if you deal with them, people will be happy. I think there are other issues that comes with it too, not just about economic. It could be other things. But at least, I think front and center, we have to address these, whether it's housing affordability, income inequality, young people, upward mobility. All these things can no longer be just let the market decide. The government has to intervene. Government have to figure a way how to make sure it's fair. Especially for the young generation.
Choi Tse-Chu is also hoping that the government can do something to restrict immigration into the tiny island so as to ease the housing crunch. Since Hong Kong returned to Chinese sovereignty in 1997, around 1.5 million mainland Chinese have immigrated to Hong Kong. Every day, up to 150 people are allowed to settle in Hong Kong. Today, they account for about 20% of the population of 7.5 million people.
我希望政府可以對於未置業或者係真係好有需要去置業嘅家庭可以提供補助咯。咁樣同埋喺公營房屋上面可以有更加大嘅力度去協助推出呢樣嘢啦。去到29歲嘅時候，你問我想唔想結婚咧？喺呢個 moment 我唔想，但係將來我會希望擁有一個婚姻嘅。 咁對於將來會唔會同父母住，或者係會唔會買樓，或買完樓之後會唔會同父母住呢啲打算咧？暫時真係冇諗過。如果結咗婚之後，我希望可以離開到呢一間屋嘅。咁但係咪喺香港，或者會唔會係去外地咧？咁呢樣嘢我有考慮過，但係唔知道個答案係咩，因為暫時將來都充滿不確定性。
An uncertain future awaits the people of Hong Kong as they continue to step up their protests until their demands are met. But at what cost? Who will ultimately pay the price while the territory falls deeper into the abyss? It's been more than 5 months since anti-government protesters began their peaceful marches and rallies against the unpopular extradition bill. Today, the demonstrations have grown into a broader movement for greater democracy and political reforms. Violence has since flared and spiraled out of control. Frequent clashes between the protesters and the police have scarred the city. The long-running protests have also shaken its reputation as a leading financial center in Asia. And as the crisis deepens, Hong Kong's economy also suffers. Its all-important tourism and retail sectors have been severely affected by the continuing crisis. Visitors to Hong Kong have dropped by more than 50% compared to last year. Aviation experts also estimate that $76 million has been lost due to flight cancellations. And some $600 billion worth of stock market value has been erased since early July this year. Gross domestic product expanded just 0.6% in the second quarter, and the city is now facing its first recession in a decade. This sharp decline has also affected the livelihoods of many who depend on tourism as their main source of income. Ms. Chua is one such person. She conducts tours in Hong Kong for tourists coming mostly from the Southeast Asian region and mainland China. But now she can't do that anymore. Businesses which are dependent on tourism have been hit hard and are now reeling from massive income losses. And she's become one of the economic casualties following months of relentless street protests that have caused tourists to stay away from the city.
以我本人嚟講啦，我就擔心兩個：一安全，第二生活。因為我係屋企主力。如果我而家咁樣失業，咁我屋企所有嘅經濟啊收入都冇晒㗎啦。咁我哋要靠邊個生活啊？係咪呢兩個係我最緊張嘅？應該佢仲可以做得好啲，因為首先而家嗰個生活就唔平靜，都嗰啲市民都失去咗安全感。咁更唔好講嗰啲遊客啦，係咪？我做旅遊啊，我都希望每一日都見到好多遊客。但係而家咁樣，我哋自己出街都驚㗎啦。
香港而家我哋好多會員啊嘅生意少咗6成7成，少咗一半。我哋而家目前啲小微企業咧，好多時候都係食物。香港係一個飲食啦、零售啦、旅遊啦。咁咧就因為已經冇製造業啦，大陸最近咧有意無意咧就將嗰啲自由行啊或者嚟香港嘅人就減少咗。咁而家嚟香港嘅人少咗之後，交通啊、食嘢啊、旅遊啊，哇全部都喊晒救命啊！
To help cushion the impact of the slowdown, some $255 million has been pledged by the government to support the city's economy, particularly in the areas of transport, tourism and retail industries. This is on top of the $2.4 billion package announced in August this year to help the underprivileged and business absorb the impact of the crisis. But businessmen like Simon have their concerns, especially if the protests continue for a much longer period.
我好啲朋友本來係一年做2億生意賺4000萬，今年都要蝕本啊！今年都即係蝕幾百萬啊！咁銀行亦都政府都推出一啲政策，就幫咗啲小微企業、中小微企業。但係咧，因為如果你嗰個佢政府借款呢個係佢考慮你有冇還款能力啊？銀行考慮下有冇還款能力。咁如果你係因為呢個暴民而影響你嗰個銷售咧？ 或者你食品咧，佢原來係唔借錢嘅，因為你係因為暴民唔知幾時停，有陣啲示威人唔知幾時停，咁你個生意如果係借錢俾你一路係咁蝕落去咧，佢銀行都唔制啊。
What a difference 5 months have made to Hong Kong's economy and the city's reputation as a leading financial centre. And it's all in the name of freedom, judicial independence and democracy. But the loss to Hong Kong in the short and long term will be difficult to bear the longer the crisis continues.
If you look at our, just even our tourists, 47 million out of the 60 millions we had last year come from one source, the mainland. So you can imagine if you were to be the merchandiser, who are you going to be sourcing for, right? You look at our stock market, 70% of the trading every day, the daily turnover, are on mainland Chinese companies, not on Hong Kong domestic companies. What you're seeing today in Hong Kong, the people want less of China. But what they don't actually understand is, by distancing ourselves from China, we'll further actually erode the one country, two system.
To make matters worse, several of the pro-democracy leaders appealed directly to US lawmakers to exert pressure on Beijing. They received a huge morale boost recently when the US House of Representatives passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. Among others, the act expressed its support for the civil rights of residents living in the semi-autonomous city. It also urged Beijing to allow Hong Kongers to govern the city without interference and states that Hong Kong voters should freely enjoy the right to elect the chief executive and all members of the Hong Kong Legislative Council by universal suffrage. That means diplomatic action and economic sanctions can be taken against those responsible for undermining Hong Kong's autonomy. China has condemned the legislation, describing it as a political plot to thwart China's development.
What some of the protesters did by bringing our issues to a Congress of a foreign country is clearly not a wise move. Already I think many in Hong Kong are accusing some of the movement behind the unrest foreign motivated. There's no hard evidence of a government is behind all that, but seeing some of our legislators, some of our leaders in the protest movement speaking with U.S. politicians, to even Secretary of State and so on, these are not helping. It's complicated matters.
For those liberal young people, they believe that democracy and human rights are universal values. That is the reason why some young Democrats went to the United States lobbying the U.S. government for the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. So we can label these young people as pro-democracy universalists in the sense that they believe that democracy is a kind of universal values. They believe that democracy is universal values cherished by most people of Hong Kong. However, this kind of argument is not necessarily accepted by some Hong Kong people who are politically conservative.
As far as I can see, the United States does want to use Hong Kong as a bargaining chip to force more concession from Beijing. But I don't think it can succeed. But at the same time, by directly interfering in Hong Kong affairs, the United States is really alerting Beijing that the Hong Kong as a threat to national security is a real threat. and that foreign powers are now using Hong Kong against China. That will make Beijing even more determined to refuse concessions to the opposition.
To ease pressure on the government and placate the sentiment on the ground, Hong Kong's embattled leader, Carrie Lam, has unveiled a package of property measures to help restore confidence in her administration. It remains unclear, however, if her latest initiative will gain political dividends.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam came from a kind of government background. She appears to have some sort of bureaucratic mentality, dealing with the current crisis in a relatively clumsy manner. For example, she did not withdraw the bill until 3 months later, until September 4th. Of course, she leaked out to the foreign business people and the press that her hands appeared to be tied, implying that the central government in Beijing did not allow her to withdraw the bill. Still, the way in which she has been handling the entire crisis has been regarded as relatively clumsy, over-bureaucratic, and slow in crisis management. So she is relying on the police to deal with the protests in a relatively peaceful manner.
Right now, her response is, of course, is very negative, and you can see her latest poll. Her support only got 50%, the lowest that we have ever had. So I don't know how she can restore the faith from the general public.
It's no longer just a matter for the government anymore. I think honestly, it's really up to Hong Kong people ourselves. What kind of a city do we want us to be in? I mean, people are unhappy. We get it. I think the entire world gets it. Now that all these issues are front and center and exposed, and I don't think we can pretend that it's not there. We have to fix them. But I don't think by destroying our city will be a solution to help us to reach there. So I think common sense has to return.
But if common sense fails to prevail, will it force Beijing to step in to try and put an end to the ongoing political crisis? Will the one country, two systems survive its crucial test before the territory comes under a direct rule from Beijing 28 years from now? October 2019. It's been more than 4 months since massive protests erupted in the city. But until today, there seems to be no end to the political unrest. In fact, the end game appears to be moving further and further away. The government has employed all the major steps possible to put an end to the crisis. But all its efforts have failed to deal a significant blow to the protest movement, whose demands for greater freedom and democracy are getting louder by the day.
I care about my future, my girlfriend's future, my family's future, and my kids in the future, if I have kids, their future. We want to live in a safe place where the political system can truly protect us and to provide us with every means to voice out if anything goes wrong. This will be our end game, I believe.
With no clear solution in sight, the government is now left with no choice but to step up its enforcement measures to help restore law and order in the city, however challenging that may be.
I'm afraid that we just have to continue to step up enforcement, law and order enforcement. I don't think there's any choice. So we need to make them understand that there's a consequence. It's free to you are free to express yourself, but you cannot do it illegally, and definitely not by means of violence. So there has to be consequences that comes with it.
In the meantime, the economy has taken a severe hit as a result of the unending political turmoil in the city, while the much-touted one country, two systems formula is in tatters. The city has also fallen into recession for the first time since the 2008 global financial crisis, following 2 consecutive quarters of economic contraction. How long will the city be able to withstand the impact of the political unrest without hurting the city and its people even more? At this juncture, nobody knows. But until today, Chua is still hoping for the situation to get better sooner rather than later. She still feels that the government can do a lot more to help ease the burden of the people.
經濟上面咧，幫到一啲咧貧窮啊嗰啲市民啊，解決我哋嗰啲住房嘅問題啦。咁可以咧就創造更多啲工作嘅機會啦，俾啲學生啦。咁我就感覺咧，如果係做到呢幾點咧，我相信啊，就相信嗰個市民啊就冇咁多嘅怨氣咯。咁至於係政治方面講細一句，我哋一個小市民真係唔到我哋講啊呢啲嘢。
But more than 4 months since the massive protests first began, the crisis has taken on a different dimension. It has now evolved into a struggle by the people to achieve separate and competing visions for the semi-autonomous city. While the people demand democratic freedom, free of any political interference from Beijing, the central government, on the other hand, wants to bolster its power and influence in the semi-autonomous city as a means of integrating Hong Kong into the larger political system.
I have reason to believe that the one country system will move beyond the so-called 50 years, the 2047. But if we stop engaging China, that is going to actually even hurt us even more. So if people, the young people, feel that they want less of China, actually it's the wrong move. They should better understand themselves what should Hong Kong role is. How can Hong Kong leverage the system we have? The two systems, the legal system, the monetary system. If we can play our role well, I really believe that it's in China's interest as well to make the two systems continue beyond 2047.
As the conflict drags on, Beijing appears to be losing patience over the widespread unrest and breakdown of law and order in the city. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has denounced the continuing violence in Hong Kong as unacceptable. He also blamed foreign forces for instigating and fanning the violence in the city. But the question is, how long can Beijing tolerate the growing tendency to separate Hong Kong from Beijing? Will it finally be forced to step in to put an end to the crisis once and for all?
Beijing make it very clear to us that the problem with Hong Kong should be dealt with by Hong Kong government and our police force, and that's why Beijing have make it very clear on a number of times that they are behind the government and behind the police, because they know the police force in Hong Kong are tasked to deal with Hong Kong problem. Now, obviously, they also make it clear that the last resort is always the People Liberation Army, who's a base here. So it's under our constitution that we can call upon them, in crisis, whether it is a natural crisis or in the case of an unrest. So that option is always there.
But it appears that for now, it's within Beijing's interest not to rock the boat. The political and economic costs of an outright military intervention will far outweigh its benefits.
The pro-Beijing camp is already impatient in Hong Kong. The pro-Beijing camp is demanding a more hardline approach to deal with the current situation. However, the Carrie Lam administration appears to be reluctant to adopt hardline approach at this moment, because any hardline approach would likely stimulate the riots and disturbances further.
Others like Martin Lee feel that the only solution to the problem is to allow for democracy to take root in the city. Otherwise, the political crisis will continue indefinitely.
We must have democracy so that our leaders, particularly our chief executive and all members of the legislature, must be elected by the people of Hong Kong by universal suffrage, so that they know that if they are not seen by the Hong Kong people to be always standing on the side of Hong Kong, whenever there is any conflict of interest between Beijing and Hong Kong, the other condition is that China must not intervene. And just leave it to our government, an elected government, to run the place.
It is basically very difficult to re-establish trust between the Chinese government side and the pro-democracy young people of Hong Kong. So we can anticipate a very difficult road ahead unless the government of Hong Kong and unless the pro-Beijing elites can play the role of middleman or intermediary between the central government in Beijing and the young Democrats of Hong Kong.
We got to give hope people that the government's willing to listen, government willing to change its way of doing business, but at the same time, that law enforcement needs to also be needs to step up, to give some deterrent to some of these more, really violent acts.
As the weeks and months go by, the issues surrounding the political unrest in Hong Kong have become even more intractable than ever before. And it remains unclear if the bitter rift between the pro-democracy protesters and Beijing will heal anytime soon. The fact of the matter is, Beijing always maintains that the one country, two systems is just an interim measure before it finally integrates Hong Kong into its political system. But for the people in Hong Kong, Beijing has speeded up the move towards one country, one system, long before the agreement expires in 2047. Can both sides finally come to a compromise and help bridge this divide? Nobody knows.